joining today's session on streamlined expenses and payments. We're going to be exploring in detail the purchases, receipts, approvals, and payments modules within ExpensePlus, which make up the process flow. We're going to cover how to streamline the processing of expense and payments, and hopefully the hints and tips that we share will save you some time and mean that you can pick up on things that maybe you've not even seen before in ExpensePlus. As we were going through the session, James had a revelation of something that he's not seen in ExpensePlus yet. So there's hope for all of us to learn something new as we go through these sessions. So the topics that we're going to cover today, obviously that overview of the expense approvals and payments process flow for the first part, and then we're going to talk about customizing those modules and what that can look like for your organization in the second part of the session. So as you can see from our dashboard, we've got our enter purchase module, manage receipts, approve expenditure, and action payments modules here. And they work in a nice flow all together. So we're going to explore what that looks like in ExpensePlus and how that can be useful and beneficial for your organization. So ExpensePlus allows there to be more than just one sort of central finance person or central finance function holding all aspects and responsibilities for finances within your organization. ExpensePlus allows you to involve volunteers or other staff members and empower them to support your finance team and support your finance processes, which is the main part of the customization part that James will take us through a little bit later. So this is our dashboard that you can see within ExpensePlus. If you're not seeing this version of dashboard, we do have two different dashboard views. So if you click on this, it will take you to your financial overview dashboard. So if you're in that dashboard, you'll have the equivalent button to come and see your dashboard process flow if you would like to. So let's start with entering purchases, which is typically the only screen that most of your team and volunteers will have access to. That's because most of your team or volunteers are only going to need to use ExpensePlus to enter purchases. Essentially, this screen and this module replaces the need for paper-based expenses and payments. It means you don't need to print out receipts anymore and staple them to a paper expense form. Then those people have to kind of manually fill it in or maybe post it in or even make an appointment to come into your organization's office and process their expense claims or payments that they're making on behalf of your organization. So that is a great way that ExpensePlus helps speed up your process flow. It's fully digital, so it's quick and efficient, and you'll see an added benefit if you are involved in your year-end, in creating your year-end accounts at the end of the year, which we're not going to cover in this session. We have separate lunch and learn sessions for year-end account creation. But if you do that, you'll see another massive plus of this process flow is that you're not having to key in data to create those accounts. That data is already digital and available to you, as well as your receipts and etc. being within ExpensePlus being digital as well for your independent examiner or auditor. So we're going to have a quick look at entering an expense claim, which many of you will already know how to do, but not everybody will have had the chance to do that yet. And an expense claim is the only option that a lot of users have access to because that's all they need. There are other purchase types and we'll go through them in a little bit. But for most users, when they come to this screen, they'll just click on enter expense claim and that's all they'll see. So we're going to pretend that we have an expense to claim. And we're going to go through this form. So we can see that we get to choose the supplier as well as enter the purchase date and choose the currency for which this expense claim is relevant. And so I'm going to select the supplier as Tesco. So these are suppliers that we've already saved within our ExpensePlus account. So you can add a new supplier if it is a supplier that you haven't used before, and you can save those details so you don't have to enter all those supplier details in every time you want to submit a purchase or expense claim against them, which is handy for things like Amazon, where you might have lots of, or Tesco, or wherever you do your shopping. It's nice to have them saved in there rather than entering their details every time you come to register a purchase. We're going to select the purchase date. Now, the purchase date is really important, especially if your church or charity creates accounts on what's called an accruals basis, because the date is used as the expenditure date. Whereas if you account on a receipts and payments basis, then the date of expenditure is actually going to be the date the money leaves your bank account. That's a big difference between the two accounting bases. And if you're not sure which accounting basis you create accounts on, it's worth checking that out. But yeah, so if you are, it's important regardless of which basis you use, but particularly if you account on an accruals basis, this purchase date is really important. So I've got a receipt that's for some fruit that I bought for this organization on the 7th of June. So I'm going to select the date in there. And then we can move down into our budget details section. So in here, we get to select which budget, which fund, which category this purchase should be registered against. Now, I and you may be able to see all the funds and categories that your organization has. I can see that we've got a general fund, a building project, food bank, reserves, roof repairs. However, lots of my users won't have access to those because the person who is buying fruit for my youth group is not going to need access to the building repairs fund. So you can customize ExpensePlus to make sure that your users have the access they need to make their role simple and smooth, but also make your life a little bit easier and make sure they're not coding purchases against categories or funds that they absolutely shouldn't be, and you therefore have to go through and recode them at some later stage. So we can say that we're going to allocate this against the general fund, and we're going to say it's admin consumables because I bought fruit for the staff team to enjoy, and therefore I can just describe it as fruit, and I can enter the amount, which was £10.08 in here, which is great. So that is nice and simple for a one-line purchase. I bought fruit for one fund and one category. If you are buying something that has multiple implications, so you might have bought some fruit for your general admin staff to consume, but you might also have bought some paper, which is part of your staff supplies, your office supplies. So you might then need to add another line, which we just used by adding a line here. So this is if the purchase is on one receipt, then we can select another category. So we can go for equipment and IT under £500. Hopefully paper is not costing us more than £500 at the time. And we can enter that information in here, and that allows us to enter multiple items from a purchase against different funds and categories. Now, if these purchases were actually two different transactions, we bought the fruit and we have a receipt for the fruit, and we bought the paper and we have a receipt for the paper, then we can't do this. We need to make sure that we are entering those as separate purchases within ExpensePlus, which is great and efficient for your receipt checking and uploading of processes of your purchases as well. So that is the adding another line. Now, if you have a repeat purchase that you often split between different funds and categories, then you could utilize this copy from a previous transaction icon here. So that might be something that you buy every month that you always split between 3 different categories. And rather than having to manually create those lines, you can just copy this. You just need to make sure you've selected the right supplier first. So it will remember those based on the supplier in question. Okay, when we're selecting categories, there are quite a lot of them. You might have loads of categories within a particular fund, but the good thing about ExpensePlus is that we can search within our categories. So you don't have to scroll all the way to the bottom. If unfortunately the category you're looking for begins with a Z, you don't have to scroll all the way to the bottom. You can start typing, and that will narrow down the number of categories available for you at that moment in time. Okay, so the payee details here, the payee automatically defaults to the person entering purchases. But as we'll see when we talk about user settings, you can give users the ability to submit on behalf of other people too. So I can say, no, actually, it's not me who is being reimbursed for this purchase. I didn't make it. I'm entering on behalf of Helen Winter, for example. In here, we can also add a new payee. So if we're adding details for a new payee or updating payee details, we can do that in here as well, but your regular users won't have that functionality. This works on all devices, so you're able to enter purchases on a phone, on a laptop, on a tablet. So this should be really simple for the person submitting expenses. It should be super easy for them to do this themselves. So although we can give people the ability to submit purchases on behalf of other people, we would generally suggest that the better way to do that is to empower all your users to have access to ExpensePlus themselves. So we don't charge for extra user. This isn't a tip that's trying to get us extra income. All of your users can be added to ExpensePlus with the right level of access. They'll be able to enter their purchases themselves, which makes sure that all the information is accurate and inputted by the person making the purchase. So while you can give people the option to submit purchases on behalf of others, we do usually recommend that you empower people by giving them access to ExpensePlus themselves. Now, there are a number of ways that you can customize the screen, which James will take us through when we talk about system settings. But what we're going to move on to now is talking about the receipt section of entering a purchase. So as I said earlier, receipts in ExpensePlus are digital, and there are 3 options in terms of uploading them. So I can click on this button and I can choose a file within my computer. So I could select this Tesco receipt here if I wanted to. The other option, if I'm on a phone or a tablet, if I click on this button, then the tablet or mobile phone is going to bring up the camera roll automatically. I can either select a photo I've already taken, or I can take a new photo of that receipt. So sometimes if you're in the shop, you can submit your expense claim then and there, making things very smooth and very quick. I've even taken a picture of my Tesco receipt in Tesco on occasion, making sure that I can get this process done and dusted as early as possible. Now, the third option, if you don't have a paper receipt or a compatible picture file, for example, maybe it's an email from Amazon, that's commonly how we get receipts from Amazon, then there are a couple of options. You can either turn that receipt into a PDF file using a third-party application, then you would be able to upload it in the same way that we did for our Tesco receipt, or you can use the third option, which is to email your receipt to ExpensePlus. In order to do that, we need to have made sure we filled in all the purchase details as we have done on this screen, and click submit, and it will give us the option to select that we want to email in our receipt. So if we click that, it tells us that we don't have a receipt attached. So it reminds us if we want to upload the receipt now, we can click that and we can just do that then. If we want to upload the receipt later, kind of saying, look, leave me alone for a little bit, I'll come back and do this in a while, we can do that. If you have lost the receipt, that is an option. It does what it says on the tin. It will send your purchase through, but it will alert your finance team that you don't have a receipt for this purchase in question. And then there's the email receipt option, and we'll show you what that looks like in just a second. But before we do that, there's just a couple of other things to show on the screen in question first. So the first one is about what happens if you have multiple purchases. Like I said, ExpensePlus requires each receipt that you have to be entered as a separate purchase. This saves the person submitting from needing to sit there adding up the pounds and pennies of each receipt that they have, which in turn reduces the risk of any math errors within your expense claims. It also saves time for the person checking receipts. So each purchase is submitted as a separate claim, but they are automatically grouped together at the payment stage. ExpensePlus can group those different purchases together so that when you come to make the bank payment to this person, ExpensePlus can total those purchases. So you only have to make one bank transaction when you're actually paying the expenses of this person. But that is up to you. You don't have to pay them individually, but you can do. So that's one thing worth covering. The other is that ExpensePlus automatically looks for duplicate purchases, and this works brilliantly to help avoid accidentally recording purchases twice or even paying someone twice for the same purchase. So I've set this up so we should be able to see that pop up come to us in a minute. So we're going to click submit, and we're going to say that we're going to email this receipt, and then hopefully this will show us what a duplicate warning comes up as. Here we go, warning, possible duplicate entry, similar purchases are already entered into ExpensePlus. And ExpensePlus does this based on the supplier and the receipt amount. So I'm going to say continue. This is not a duplicate, but obviously we could cancel this if we needed to, just helping make sure that people don't accidentally enter an expense claim twice. Once we've done that, it brings up this email option. So if you want to email your receipt in, you always email receipts to receipts@expenseplus.co.uk, which will show up in this pop-up. And all you have to do is go to that email that you want to use as the receipt, click the forward button, and make sure you forward it to that email address. And what we ask is that you make the subject line of the email matching what is in this pop-up. So we can see we've got a specific code for this purchase, we can copy that and enter that as the subject of our forwarded email. As long as you do that, then our system will automatically use that email as the receipt. So if there's an attachment to the email, it will take that attachment and say, great, I'll use this PDF that's part of the email as the receipt. And if not, so like for Amazon, it will convert the body of the email into being the receipt. So that works well for Amazon, which is exactly what we want. So that is the way that you email in your receipts for a purchase if you would like to. And ExpensePlus will then confirm that you've created that purchase successfully here in the top, in the yellow bar. ExpensePlus will also give you a unique R number. So we see this is R2258. That allows us to uniquely identify this expense claim, this purchase. So if we are trying to find out a little bit more information about a purchase, we know the R number, we can search for it in our ExpensePlus account, as well as helping us identify it separately from, for example, those other duplicate or similar purchases that popped up. Even if they weren't duplicates, we can then differentiate between the three that popped up because they have different R numbers. There are obviously different purchase types available in ExpensePlus, and not all of your users will need all of them, and some of your users won't need any of them. But we have mileage claims, which allow you to obviously claim business mileage if that is appropriate for your organization and for those particular users. In here, you get to kind of add the date, the location. It will calculate. You can calculate the total miles. And within your organization settings, you would have already set up mileage rates that are available for your users to select. We can enter business card purchases. These are where your organization has either credit cards or debit cards. If that is the case for your organization, then those people that have card holders, we'd recommend you definitely give them access to this screen so that they can record their purchase details up front. So they would, once they buy something on the debit card or the credit card, they add that into ExpensePlus as they do it, which makes your processes streamlined and smooth. Now, if they don't enter those up front, there is a way to assign business card purchases to the card holder at bank reconciliation, which would then kind of prompt them to enter the details that are missing. But if they enter these details up front, then those details aren't missing and you don't need to contact them to ask them to fill those in. When people submit business card purchases in a timely way, they're also far less likely to lose receipts. So we would always recommend you add your business card holders as users, you give them access to this screen, and you encourage them to enter those purchases upfront rather than catch up at the end of the bank statement month. It allows you to make sure that those receipts aren't lost, hopefully, because you might be reconciling things 5 weeks after they've been purchased. And I don't know about you, but receipts in my house don't last 5 weeks. They get lost. They actually get drawn on by my children. So we would recommend that you allow people to and encourage people to enter their purchases upfront if they have a business card. Now, if you have business cards and you're sharing them between your team, which we would recommend you probably don't do, but it can work in ExpensePlus as long as those people using the business card record those purchases upfront. You can imagine if there is one business card, but several people using it, and you try and reconcile that at the bank reconciliation stage without those details, it's going to be very difficult to differentiate who bought what, at what date, for what amount, what budget should this be going against. So we would highly recommend that, firstly, that if you're going to use business cards, then one card per card holder is the best policy. But even if you are going to share cards, then you kind of ensure that your card holders are adding their purchase details up front rather than just making the purchase and worrying about it later. Having mentioned entering purchases in a timely manner and the use of business cards, it is also worth quickly highlighting that it's best practice for your church or charity to have like a purchasing policy. Outline your expectations for people providing receipts and submitting purchases in a timely way. You can kind of set that out in writing, have a policy across your organization. For more information, and we have a free purchasing policy template, then please see the blog that James is going to put in the chat for us now. And if you have business cards, it's also best practice to have like a one-page card holder policy, which again sets out those expectations for card holders in terms of what you'd like them to do. So check out the blog. That might be useful for you and your organization. Now, business card purchases work in a really similar way to expense claims, but there is a difference, and they skip the payment stage because this money has obviously already been spent, and so there's no payment to authorize or set up. Okay, so that's business card purchases where you've spent the organization's money via a debit or credit card. An invoice to pay is where a supplier sends you an invoice and you need to pay them. Again, it works similarly to an expense claim. The due date is really helpful because the due date is going to show up on the payment screen. So the person making payments might think, oh, this one's not due for 3 weeks. I actually don't need to make this payment in our payment run this week. Or they might think the opposite and go, oh, this one was due last week and I definitely need to make this payment as soon as possible. So it's really helpful to have the due date in your invoice to pay. So let's have a look at that. In here, you can add your invoice date and your due date. Okay, so you don't have to change the invoice date to be the due date. It's just helpful for that to be in there. The other thing that's really helpful is the invoice reference field. So if you enter something into this field, you'll be able to search for the invoice reference within your ExpensePlus account, and so you can find it easily. And we're going to look at that search screen in a minute. But also, this will become the payment reference when a payment is set up. So the supplier is also going to get an email at the payment stage with the invoice reference showing. So if you put the right reference in there that they've given you, then they're not going to have any queries about which invoice this relates to. And it's going to make the whole process flow off the back of making payments much simpler for you as well. In a similar way to expense claims, you can split an invoice to pay over multiple funds and categories, and you can upload the invoice in question in the same way that you can attach a receipt to an expense claim. Okay, so that's invoices, and then we've got two more. We've got gifts of money. Gifts of money are typically only relevant for churches, and so if you're a charity, you may want to turn this off in the system settings if you've got no need for it. A common example of a gift of money that we see is if someone comes to speak at your church and you're going to pay them a financial gift for doing so, then this would be how you record that in ExpensePlus. With gifts of money, the receipt is optional. You may want to provide this because your independent examiner at the year end might want to see like a trail or evidence for this particular gift, but it's optional, so you can decide whether that is required or not. Now, a common question we get about gifts of money center around recurring gifts. So if we go to enter a gift of money, you'll see at the top of the screen, it says recurring gifts of money should not be entered via this screen. So for example, your organization might give £50 a month to your local food bank. You don't need to, now you can, but you don't need to enter this as a gift of money through this screen. That's because ExpensePlus can automatically handle recurring transactions at the point of bank reconciliation. So while you could key this information in every month and match it one for one, ExpensePlus can actually and then take it through the process flow that we're going through, but you don't need to because recurring transactions can be reconciled similar to direct debits at the bank reconciliation stage. And with the quick match function within ExpensePlus, these can be remembered and therefore quick matched each month for really quick and smooth, efficient bank reconciliation. So if you have a recurring gift of money, we would suggest that you reconcile that at the bank reconciliation stage rather than entering them into ExpensePlus as a purchase. And the same goes for direct debits. So you don't need to key these in. They're automatically dealt with at the point of bank reconciliation. And if you want to know more about the bank reconciliation module, we run another Lunch and Learn session on that section of the system. So do check that out on our training page. So let's move on through the process flow. Now that we have purchases submitted, we can have a look at the purchases that I have submitted here. So we've entered that purchase. This is my profile. You can see that I've entered a few different items here to be paid. These are my active purchases. I can view all my purchases for a particular year. So I could see all my no purchases for 2025. But we can view all of them here. And this box here, this status box, will show your users what stage their purchase is at. So if they've submitted an expense claim, they can see whether the receipt has been uploaded and checked. They can see whether the expense claim is awaiting approval or not. And this would obviously handily turn to a thumbs up if it has been approved. And this box would tell them whether that claim has been paid or not. So your users get good viewership of their purchases and expense claims that they've entered, so they don't have to keep contacting you to find out whether you've got their expense claim, whether it's been paid, whether it's been approved, or where it's being held up in the process flow. So that is really handy. Okay, you can also see as a finance level user, you've got the additional permission to see purchases of anyone in the team. So if anyone in your team is struggling or they're not sure why they've not been paid yet, you can go and look at the purchase of someone else in the system. For example, I could select. Let's go for Stan Wiggins. I can see some of his purchases here, and I can tell them, look, this receipt's been authorized, it's been approved, it just hasn't been paid yet. And we'll get that sorted as soon as possible. If Harry Pellon has got in touch to ask me to see where his expense claim is up to. It's worth talking about how you can edit purchases. So for regular users, so anyone that's not a finance team user, they can only edit a purchase up until the point of receipt check. So as soon as the receipt has been checked by your organization, a regular user will not be able to change their purchase. And that's for a good reason, because you don't want them to come and change the amount or start messing around with the transaction after the receipt has been checked. So if you have a user that comes to you and says, I've coded this purchase to the wrong category, but I can't seem to enter it, the reason is going to be that the receipt check has already happened. Now, as a finance team level user, you can still edit that purchase, but even a finance team level user, once the purchase has been bank matched, i.e. there's an outgoing transaction that has already been reconciled to on the bank statement to this purchase, you then as a finance team user also won't be able to change the purchase amount because of course the bank transaction has already been matched to it. So you wouldn't want to do that. If someone's entered a purchase for £10, you've matched it to something for £10, there's no reason to be changing that to a different amount, and you need to sort that any discrepancy on a kind of ad hoc basis. Let's have a look at the search all purchases option. So we can click this button here, which is commonly missed, but it's actually a really, really good function of ExpensePlus and a good way to search and look for purchases. So we can have a look at it and we'll view this in a number of different ways. So as you remember, each purchase has a purchase number. So if we know that purchase number in question, we can use the purchase number to search in here. You can pop that in the box and click search. Or maybe the only thing you know about a purchase is that it was a laptop or a laminator, or you know what the purchase was, but you don't know who bought it or where it was from. In that case, we can click on the description. We can maybe type laminator in here and see if that will come up. We can choose whether you are searching within the last 12 months, or if you know maybe it was in the last financial year, we can apply that filter and it will have a look for anything that has that description in it. So we can see here, look, the description for a laminator is here. Nice and handy. I can find that purchase easily through this version of the searchable purchases. The invoice reference is where it's important to put an invoice reference. So if you want to search by invoice reference, you can do in here. Nice and simple. We'll narrow down your purchase search in here. By payee, looks for anyone that's been paid. So you might be like, what are all the purchases that have been paid to Bob Jones in this financial year so far? In which case we can select Bob Jones from our list here. We can select the last 12 months and apply the filters and see what we've paid him. We've already paid him one transaction. We paid him his salary in 1 month. But you can create a report or find these purchases and drill down and look into the transactions from this screen. So we can look into the details of that salary transaction as well from the searchable purchases screen. Similarly, by supplier allows you to see all supplier payments for a particular supplier, no matter whether they're expense claims, business card purchases, or invoices. So like a laminator example, we might know that that was bought from Amazon. So if we select Amazon and we saw that that was in the last financial year, we can apply filters and we can see all the purchases that are from Amazon, and we can see that the laminator is in here as well. So we can find our specific purchase while also seeing all of our purchases that are for the supplier Amazon. We can also search by submitter. This allows you to see what any particular user has submitted. And again, you can select the filter criteria in here and narrow that down, or you could do purchase amount. And a quick example of where this might be really useful. So if you create accounts on an accruals basis, at year end, you might need to make sure that you've capitalized all of the purchases that need capitalizing. And essentially the way you do this is by looking for all purchases that are your large purchases, the ones that are maybe over your threshold for capitalizing. And so how can we do this? Well, we can come in here and say that my capitalization policy is anything more than £1,000. Then I can select because we're looking at doing this for the last financial year, I can change that to the last financial year and apply filters. This will bring up any purchase over that threshold. And I can look down the list and just have a look and see if there's anything that has been coded to an expenditure category that maybe could or should be a fixed asset purchase dependent on my organization's purchasing policy and my organization's policy on what qualifies for capitalization. So I can see maybe this new oven, it's over £1,000. It's currently in an expenditure category, but we could go in and we could modify that to be a fixed asset if required. Okay, so that's a really good use of the purchase amount search in here. So we're going to stop there with the purchases module, and we'll touch on how you can customize it when we move on to talk about system settings. But first, we have 3 more modules in the process flow. So let's look at managing receipts. If we go into our receipts module, we can check those receipts. In this section, we are looking to make sure that the receipt, firstly, is legible and clear, that we can read it, and that it matches the description and the details that have been inputted for this purchase. So we're looking for a farm foods receipt because that's what the supplier is. We can see that's correct. We're looking for a purchase amount of £8.54. We can see that on the receipt here. It's nice and clear, but it might be too small. You might be able to zoom in. If the receipt was blurry, you might need to send that back to the person that submitted it. But if this is correct, we can click accept, and that will go through to the next stage of the process flow. If not, we can reject this receipt and we can give the submitter a reason that we are rejecting that receipt. So it might not be readable, it might be the wrong supplier. You can tick and you can add optional notes in here, which would then be sent to the person that submitted the purchase, asking them to either upload a new receipt or upload a new receipt or say that they've lost it potentially, if that is the case, if they've attached the wrong receipt. We recommend trying to find a balance for your receipt checking process that helps your organization be as efficient as possible. So for some, that will be more regular. For others, that will be you'll have a bit more time between checking receipts. It basically depends on the capacity of your team and the efficiency that you are looking for in your organization. So if you're checking receipts every day, that's obviously going to expedite things through the process flow. But do you really need to be making payments and checking receipts every day? Is that the most efficient process for your organization? It's probably not. For some organizations, it is. So you just need to work out for your church or charity what the right frequency is for these steps. And for most organizations, that is done on a weekly basis, which means that the longest anyone's ever going to wait to get paid is probably about a week, because even if they submitted it straight after you have made a payment run, it's only going to take 1 week before you do that again. So we can authorize lost receipts from here as well. So we can have a look at any purchases that have been submitted with a lost receipt. We can view who has submitted it. We can see how many lost receipts they have submitted in the last 3 months, which might impact your decision on whether you accept that purchase or you reject it, because obviously I have lost a receipt. So that might tie up with your purchasing policy. You might say that they can have kind of 3 purchases in a 3-month period without a receipt, and that would be fine. But the 4th one, you'd have to then have a conversation about. So that is up to you and your organization. Okay. We can also have a look and send reminders to anyone that has not sent or not uploaded their receipt. So that would be in those examples where I've said I'm going to upload a receipt to a purchase later. I might have actually forgotten to upload that receipt later, where you have the ability as a finance team user to send reminders for those purchases, and you can kind of select and deselect whichever ones you want to do for that in this screen here. And then we can have a look at our approvals module, which is the next stage of the process flow. So once things have their receipt checked, they will move through to the approvals process, where we will come to this screen. So when purchase has been receipt checked, they'll move on through to the approvals module, assuming that you have approvals turned on and the purchase qualifies. So we spoke about some things that don't qualify for approvals, like oh no, we didn't. Anyway, if approval is required, then this is what happens inside the approvals module. So we can see there are particular purchases here in this top section awaiting my approval. Why are they awaiting my approval? It's because I'm the fund and category budget holder that these purchases have been allocated against. So we know that approvals work best when budget holders have ownership and responsibility to take care of a particular aspect of expenditure for their church or charity, so managing their budget. And this screen gives your budget holders the tools to make sure they're keeping track of budgets, because I'm not just being asked to approve this particular purchase of a Stream Deck for Sarah for £79. I'm also able to see which budget this is a part of and see how much of that budget has already been spent in this financial year, which is really helpful and empowering for your budget holders to see what's being spent from their budget category, and means that they shouldn't be in a position where they're overspending without realizing it, because they get to see this as they go through. So that should work really nicely, essentially giving them the tools to fulfill their role. Now, what happens if a budget holder is away for 3 weeks? Well, that is where I have the ability to approve on their behalf, which is a setting we can customize user. So I can see that Sam Lewis is the approver for these categories, but he's away for 3 weeks. If I am okay and given permission to kind of approve this on his behalf, then I can do so. That's why I would have this table, but not everyone will have that if you don't turn that on for your organization or for your particular approvers. There's lots more ways to customize the approvals module, so we'll have a look a bit further at that later on. There is a great report in here, the View Purchase Approvals report, which allows us to see who the approver was for any purchase, and also if you have dual approval, you'll see who the dual approver of that purchase was as well. You'll also be able to see that any approvals that didn't have a primary approver, any purchases that didn't have a primary approver, it will tell you why that is the case. So we can see for this is a direct debit, and therefore this purchase type does not require approval. So a quick shout out for the purchase approval report. We'll quickly go on to the payments module now, and then we'll wrap around, as promised, to the different purchases, to the different customizations for this module. So this screen should mirror what is going on in your bank account, which you get to set in your system settings. So if you have dual approval for payments on your bank account, your screen will look like this, with a payments to set up section and a payments to authorize section. If you just have single approval, single authorization, then you'll just have this top screen. This is where your payments that have been approved come ready to be set up. So we can see that we've got, like I said, those grouped expense claims for Hannah Cronin. So they've been grouped, so we can pay this as a total amount if we want to. As Hannah is an existing payee within our organization, that indicates that they are an existing payee on your bank account. So their account details are here, but you should have those in your system already. You can one-click copy the payment reference and one-click copy the payment amount to set up those payments. Now we can see here we've also got a new payee. So this is highlighted by ExpensePlus. So if it was a new payee or a new supplier, this would be highlighted. So we can copy this person's details and add them as a payee in your online banking, as well as also therefore copying the invoice, the payment reference and the amount. Once that is set up on your bank, you can then mark these as paid within ExpensePlus. And if you have dual authorization, they'll move through to the payments to authorize stage, which would usually be done by a different user within ExpensePlus, as it would be done by a different person on the bank account. So for this organization, someone else has set up the payment for this boiler repair, but it's come through to me to authorize. In here, I can check what the purchase is. I could drill into the details of that purchase, as well as then authorize it on the bank and then authorize it within ExpensePlus. So there we have it. That is the Expense Plus process flow. And I am going to hand over to James, who's going to take us through a little of the customizable settings for these modules within Expense Plus.
Great. Thank you so much, Jack. One moment while I just share my screen. Hope you're all managing to survive okay in the heat. We're nearly at the end now, and so then you'll be able to ask your questions. So if you haven't done that already, then do send those in the chat. Great. So as Jack said, we're going to talk now about some of the customizable settings. In order to do that, we need to go to the settings, and you can get to the settings either in the top right using this little cogwheel, or in the left-hand menu. You can go down to settings at the bottom. We'll go through this cog in the top right. And the first place that we're going to start is within our system settings, and within there, within our organizational settings. And in here, you can decide whether you want to turn budgeting on or off. By default, it's enabled, and this is what we would recommend because it helps you to manage your organization well. And as Jack showed you, then when budget holders are making decisions on approvals, they can see what their total budget is for the year, as well as how much has been spent. But of course, if you disable this, they will no longer be able to see that total budget. So if you're wondering why that is, it's probably because this is disabled. And as I mentioned already, typically we would not recommend disabling it, but you can choose that yourself. So we're going to come out of these organization settings now. You can just press back, or you can use the back button in your web browser. And we're going to go to the purchase settings. And within here, there are a number of settings. So the first one is the ability to be able to submit foreign currency. So I had a question, I think it was from Andrew, about this. So if you want to be able to allow your users to submit in currencies other than your default, of course, I imagine we've all got our currency set to pounds, then you can turn that on, and that will give that option that you would have seen on Jack's purchases screen. And this is great if you've got people who are buying things in US dollars, for example, or euros. It just allows them to enter the amount in that original currency. And you'll be thinking, well, what's going to happen then? Because my bank account's in pounds, so I can't pay things in US dollars or other currencies. Well, what's going to happen is that if they enter it in a foreign currency, Expense Plus is going to use the exchange rate that's today, the live exchange rate, to convert that into pounds so that when it's on the reconciliation screen, you'll see it in pounds. Now, of course, it's likely to be a few pence out for various reasons. However, you are able to still match it. You would just tick it in the left-hand table, tick it manually in the right-hand table because it won't automatically select because the amounts don't match. When you press confirm, it will then give you a warning that it's going to update the purchase amount to whatever the amount is that's on your bank statement. And that's the same in one sense, whether you have this turned on or off, because if you have it turned off, then people are going to have to do the conversion themselves. And again, they're likely to get it wrong, especially if they can't see the statement. So that's just a useful feature in that case. Here you can enable and disable gifts of money, as Jack mentioned, probably applicable more for churches, but you can turn that off system wide. And also you can turn off the ability to, or on or off, direct debits on the purchase screen. By default, it's not, because generally it's more efficient to just reconcile these from the bank reconciliation screen, but there may be reasons why you want to submit the bills, etc. And so you can enter them on the purchase screen. And the final setting on here is around reimbursement declarations. And this will enable a little tick box on expense claims and mileage claims where the user can just declare, yes, I have claimed this. It's an appropriate claim within our policies. And in the case of mileage, it's declaring that they have the necessary insurance in place in order to claim that mileage and to use their car for business purposes. And then on this purchases screen as well, you've got this additional thing down here for mileage rates where you can add new mileage rates. So you might have a rate for a bike. Some organizations do. You might have additional rates for if you have passengers, or in the case of the recent HMRC update, you may wish to add the new 55 pence allowable rate from the HMRC. And do note that if you've only got one rate configured, you would have to add a new rate before you're allowed to deactivate. Because at the moment you'll see I can't deactivate this. I also can't edit it. If I click on it, it won't let me edit it because we've used it. If we were able to edit that, it would change all of the past claims, which we definitely don't want to do. So you have to add a new mileage rate if you want to, and then if you want to delete your other one, you can delete that once it's added. So again, we'll go back and we're going to go to the receipts module settings. Sorry, I'm going a bit quick because we've not got loads of time left. But you can always watch back later. And in here, there's various settings. So we can decide whether you want to require direct debits to have some receipts. Again, typically most people leave that as optional. The same with supplier refunds. And you can choose whether you want to be able to batch upload receipts. Again, typically this is something you might do as a one-off at the very start, so I won't cover it, but you can search our help guide for an article that's called Mid-Year Migration, Uploading Receipts. And in case you don't know, you can get to our help guide on any page in Expense Plus. You've got this blue icon at the top right. You click on that and that will take you to our help guide. So that's how you get to that. And the final setting on here was to do with receipt check details. Jack showed you the receipt checking screen earlier, but you can switch between a basic level of detail and a more detailed level of detail. And so that is the receipts settings. So we're going to go back and we're going to have a look at the approvals module settings. So in here, you have the ability to turn approvals on or off, and there are three options with that. You can either have it enabled for all of your categories of expenditure. You can either have it enabled to be set per category as to which ones you want, or you can have it disabled. Typically, we'd always say it's best to be enabled, but there may be reasons why you don't want certain categories. For example, I don't know, utility bills, perhaps you decide those need to be approved because sadly, we all have to pay our utility bills. We don't really have a choice on that one. So you might argue that the approvals is not required, not necessary. Low value purchase, you can decide whether you want purchases below a certain amount to be automatically approved. So you might say anything below £10, let that just be automatically approved. And you can decide the secondary approval. Note this is nothing to do with your bank authorization. This is purely approving the purchase or expenditure from your organization's point of view. And so you can say, well, look, we want purchases above a certain amount to require a second person to approve them. And we can list who those second approvers are here. Again, this is nothing to do with backup approvers either, not to be confused with that. So that's there. And then supplier payments, you can decide whether you want them to go through your approvals process. You might say, well, do you know what? Look, our bank has dual authorization. So any invoices that we've got to pay, actually, by very nature of them being put through the bank, they're going to require someone else to approve them. So you may say, oh, do you know what? Let's just turn that off. And the same with salary payments. You can decide whether you want to have those set to approve or require approval or not. And then finally on here, there's a setting that asks you, well, what would you like to do if the person who submitted the purchase is actually the approver for that category? Would you like it to go to the backup approver, which is normal, or somebody else? In case of an example where maybe the backup approver is their spouse and you've set that to not be allowed, or do we want to assign to the backup approver? But if there was no backup approver or the backup approver is like their spouse, then just skip the approval. So that is how that works. And finally, in this section, if we go to the payment settings, then this is where we can set our settings that we want for when we're making payments through our bank. So by default, typically we would want the payment method to be bank transfer. But if you pay your things by check, you could set that here. And the default payment account, you can set that as you wish. And here you can decide, well, do you want a single payment to be allowed to be taken from multiple funds? And typically in organizations, you would always allow this because remember that funds and bank accounts are two totally separate things. Commonly, they are confused. However, you can have as many funds as you like and have just one bank account, and that all the payments and all the money can be kept together. You need to account for them within your Expense Plus system with separate funds. That's fine, but you don't need separate bank accounts. But if there's a genuine reason why you don't want to allow cross fund payments, for example, maybe you're a large church, for example, with multiple churches, and each church has their own bank account, but they're all under one legal entity. Maybe each church is responsible for making their own payments because they're sort of semi-autonomous. That might be a reason why you might want to turn that on. And then this payment authorization, this relates to whatever you have on your bank. So you should set this to mirror your bank settings. So if you only require one person to make a payment, which is not normal, then you would set that. If you require two people for any payment, you set it on this. And if you require two people only when the payment is above a certain amount, you would use this option. And then that helps Expense Plus to mirror and support the process of paying things through the bank.